Happy Monday to everyone. This is Mark Rogers. Welcome to College Football Coast to Coast. This is our fifth edition. We come your way on Blab each and every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time to talk about college football and nothing but college football and coast to coast. So over the weekend, after all the big games, after my favorite Saturday of the year, college football rivalry Saturday, we saw the coaching moves start to take place and the coaches start to fall across the country at some of the major programs, and no more so than Mark Richt at Georgia. So we've heard that it was a mutual decision. That was the official announcement. We've also heard that Mark Richt decided himself to step down at the University of Georgia, and maybe he was given a little nudge. That would be my guess. Also, Kyle Flood out at the university, at Rutgers University, I should say. Mike London out at Virginia. Those two coaching situations, no big surprise. Kyle Flood in his second season at Rutgers, dismal, 1-7 in the Big Ten after a decent first season. And more so than that for Kyle Flood, he was involved in some off-field transgressions. He tampered with the eligibility of a player in his academic standing and was suspended for 3 games earlier in the season. Mike London at Virginia has been able to recruit fairly well there in the D.C. and Virginia areas, but has not delivered on the field. Virginia with another non-postseason coming up this year after losing to Virginia Tech 23-20. The Cavaliers outside the 41 bowl structure at 4-8. Offensive coordinator changes at Minnesota and Penn State. We can discuss that. Les Miles, the huge news and the very interesting and disturbing story out of Baton Rouge, where Les Miles was reported gone. And then suddenly after the game, after he was given a victory ride after a win, a meaningless win, possibly, based on the standings against Texas A&M, Les Miles ridden off the field by his players, lifted into their arms like a Super Bowl or a bowl championship win. And the fans certainly came out and they reacted before the game to Les Miles' departure, as it seemed at that time. And Les Miles, though, sting as the athletic director stepped up after the game and took the podium before Les Miles after the win over the Aggies 19-7. And Les Miles sting at LSU. So we can dive into that. I believe where there is smoke, there is fire. And there was certainly something to the Les Miles departure. So whether that is LSU determining within the span of a few days that they could not get the coach that they wanted outside, or determining that, hey, we're going to give him one more chance. Let's see if he wins this game. I would think it would be crazy. And I did hear this from a number of sources that they were still making a decision at LSU in the third quarter of the game against Texas A&M. So I'm wondering if, the athletic director, the president are sitting there watching the game thinking, got a first down. All right, let's keep Les. When the decisions are that close, when they mean a $15 million buyout and one of the most prestigious jobs and programs in the country, that's a bit humorous. But the athletic director for LSU coming out with his support after the LSU Texas A&M game. And most notably and most recent is the hiring of Clay Helton at USC. So coaching upheaval in Southern California at USC for a number of years now. The important statement that I heard out of the mouth of athletic director Pat Hayden in regards to confirming that Clay Helton has been hired, given a 3-year contract with a 2-year option, is that he talked about winning Pac-12 championships and national championships and putting USC back to the elite of college football. But the first phrases out of his mouth, Pat Hayden, in describing Clay Helton, were character and integrity and leading young men the right way. And after the issues we've seen with Steve Sarkisian and the reputation of Lane Kiffin before him, and in the aftermath, to a certain extent, a lesser extent, Pete Carroll, I think that was very important for USC to get a guy in place that is going to be respected, not just for winning on the field and competing for championships, which that's a must at USC, but also a guy that they can rely on, not doing stupid things, but being the guy, the CEO that can be trusted from an ethical and character standpoint of saying the right things, doing the right things, and exuding an image of integrity and honor. And they believe they have that in Clay Helton. All right. I mentioned a few minutes ago my favorite week in college football. I love New Year's Day. We know what that gives us. The bowl season's tremendous. Yeah, there are too many bowls, but if you don't like them, just don't watch. But this week, rivalry week, is what it's all about in college football. This is what separates college football from the other sports. The rivalries are meaningful. And so if you look at professional sports, what makes rivalries not so meaningful is that my guy could be playing for your team next year. And in college basketball, there's too many games played and too many meaningless games by the likes of Duke and North Carolina, where they already have locked up an NCAA berth weeks before. These rivalry games are huge in the pageantry, the tradition. It's all a spectacle, and it's great. So let's talk about the big winners over the weekend, the big losers over the weekend. Big winners, pretty obvious. Oklahoma has all but wrapped up a college football playoff spot with a convincing win over Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 conference. So the Big 12 has avoided the issue that it faced last season. There's an outright champion in the Big 12, and it's Oklahoma, and in convincing fashion. So forget the Texas loss. I haven't. It's still on the resume, but most people have. And Oklahoma, in a sense, if you're going to lose one game, it seems to have set a pattern here over the last couple of years in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee. Lose the game early and lose it to a non-contending team. Lose a bad game if you can make it up with big wins, because Oklahoma swept the big three, the other big three in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Baylor. They swept those three. If they would have lost that game to those three, beaten Texas, that game would have been forgotten and chalked up as an automatic win. Then you have some debate within the Big 12, even if OU would have won the championship, that they lost to TCU or they lost to Baylor or Oklahoma State. But they swept the other big three in the Big 12. Oklahoma's in. Stanford's an interesting case. They keep hope alive with an incredible comeback in the last few seconds, game-winning drive, completed pass from Kevin Hogan to Devin Kajus down the middle. They spiked the football, or they ran it once, got in position, kicked the field goal, and beat Notre Dame. So I think you know who one of the big losers is going to be in this. Stanford, a big winner, probably outside the college football playoff, but they still are breathing with a Pac-12 championship game against USC this Saturday. Ohio State, it may be too little, too late after losing to Michigan State last week, but the Buckeyes resounding in their win over Michigan, 42-13. I think this is a team that if they miss the playoff, which is about 95% certain that Ohio State's missing the playoff, there are four teams that are going to be pretty ecstatic and four head coaches that Ohio State's not in the college football playoff. They showed up on this day in Ann Arbor. Michigan State, of course, a more tangible victory that means something. They win the Eastern Division, get the spot in the Big Ten championship game. And this is the first time all year against a quality opponent. And I know Penn State's not great, but they're one of the top 40 or 45 teams in the country. Michigan State came out. They put the hammer down. And they did it basically from the opening drive of the game, 55-16. Connor Cook played the game. He threw 24 passes, I believe. He looked pretty good, put up some big numbers. And that's even the better sign than the 55-16 margin, is that Connor Cook was able to deliver the football, throw it downfield, and should be ready for the Big Ten championship game. I have no doubt that the shoulder's still an issue, and it's going to be an issue until he's able to rest. And so Michigan State hopes that they've got 3 more games to play, and then Connor Cook can rest and get ready for the NFL draft and the NFL Combine. But Connor Cook and Michigan State move on to face Iowa, the other big winner over the weekend. They beat Nebraska. They've been the most disrespected team across college football for what they've accomplished. Just a 2-point favorite at Nebraska against the team that finished 5-7, and Iowa didn't blow them out. They did what Iowa does. They were actually outgained in this game by over 200 yards. Nebraska gained twice as many first downs, 22-11, and Nebraska held the ball for 34 minutes to 26. But Iowa didn't turn the ball over. They protected the football, as they do. They won in the kicking game, and they turned over Nebraska 4 times. So they win 28-20. Iowa moves on, and they've got their shot against Michigan State. North Carolina blew out North Carolina State. It got a little close at the end. It was an 11-point game, but North Carolina from the opening drive dominated NC State on the road. So North Carolina, we will see what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks of their win against North Carolina State and their resume now at 11-1, having lost week 1 against South Carolina. And Houston now 11-1. They defeat Navy. That's a big win. They could make their way into the New Year's Six. Certainly not a college football playoff contender. They needed to win all of them and hope and pray. But I think we've gotten to a point that if the likes of Temple, Houston, Memphis, Navy can continue to build and sustain programs that they've built to date, and that's difficult to do because if you're a coach at that level and you build a program, you usually move on to the Power Five. But if that's the case, then the American Athletic Conference is going to have to be more scrutinized, more considered when we see Temple competing with Notre Dame, when we see Memphis beating Ole Miss and the like. All right, big losers. It was a great effort by Notre Dame. They go cross country. They should have won the game. They give up a big pass play right at the end with 9 seconds left. Stanford field goal knocks Notre Dame out of the college football playoff. So here's a team that goes on the road to the number 1 team. Clemson has a 2-point conversion to send it to overtime. They don't convert. Then they have this happen to them. They give up the lead in the closing 9 seconds. So Notre Dame, quality team, didn't have that one win, not going to have a conference championship, of course, and they're 10-2 with 2 losses. They're out. Would have loved to have seen what the committee would have done with 4 conference champions with 1 loss, or Iowa undefeated possibly, and Notre Dame. But that's not gonna happen. And if Clemson and Alabama hold serve, then it's a pretty clear-cut decision. I still hate the system. I've talked about that before. I can talk about it again. We've got the entire offseason about how I would do it. But I don't like the system, except for it's better than the BCS because it affords 2 other worthy teams that have earned a spot, 2 other teams that can throw up their resume against the top 2, and they have an opportunity to win a national championship. So more games is better in this case. All right, Florida, big loser. It does not keep them from going to the SEC championship game. They've won the East, but losing 27-2 to Florida State and being completely annihilated in the second half. Dalvin Cook ran for 150 yards against a worn-out Florida defense. The defense for the Gators is one of the 5 best in the country, certainly in the top 10, but they were just worn out. 3 and outs by the offense. Treon Harris is lost. So why is Florida the big loser? Well, the one shot they had to get to a college football playoff, and most people, they thought they had no shot. Yeah, realistically, based on the way they were playing, they had no shot, but they had Florida State and Alabama in front of them. Winning an SEC and losing 1 game, Florida would have been in the college football playoff, but we can clearly see that they're not good enough to compete at that level. So for Florida, it's a big loss, not just because it knocks them out of the college football playoff, because I don't think that was realistic, but because I don't know what kind of confidence this team can possibly have. Jim McElwain has done a tremendous job in Gainesville, but he is going to have to do he's going to have to be the master psychologist this week to convince his team that they can beat Alabama. There was a story that Urban Meyer, prior to the Alabama game, kind of sensed that his team may be a little bit underconfident. The Alabama mystique, the Big Ten was downtrodden by the national media, and they were told a number of times by so many people that they couldn't win, that he, as soon as he found out that Michigan State was about to beat Baylor, that Wisconsin was about to beat Auburn, he got those games on TV. He had the players sit and watch 2 Big Ten teams defeat two of the better teams in the country. Well, not Auburn necessarily, but a very talented Auburn team, and we know what they did the year before, to boost some confidence and make some connections that, hey, we can compete with Alabama. I think it's going to be difficult for Florida and Jim McElwain to convince itself that they can compete with the Tide, let alone all the logistical and schematic issues in dealing with that football team. All right, Baylor, a big loser. They took TCU to overtime. Yes, they were not going to win the Big 12 championship because Oklahoma took care of business the next day, but Baylor could have stayed in the conversation with one loss. So they lose a sloppy game. If you get a chance to see it, I watched it. I was intrigued, more so than watching 61-58 with wide receivers running all over the field and poor defense, blown assignments the year before. I was actually intrigued to watch a game in the muck and the mud, the rain coming down. It was tolerable in the first quarter, and that's when most of the points were scored. Then after that, forget it. 14 all after regulation. TCU wins in overtime. And so Baylor, they're out with 2 losses. UCLA could have reached the Pac-12 championship game. They were a favorite. No, they weren't. They were 3-point underdog against USC on the road. I actually liked UCLA here. I was secretly rooting for UCLA because I picked them to win the Pac-12 championship preseason. But they are certainly not up to Stanford's standing right now in the Pac-12, and Michigan, obviously a big loser. We got a question coming in from 79 Hokie. Thoughts on Fuente hire at Virginia Tech? Well, Virginia Tech's administration, their athletic director, must have been completely sold on Justin Fuente because they acted quickly. So I think the timing of Frank Beamer's announcement was brilliant. It was strategic to get out in front of this huge wave of coaching moves, more so than we've ever seen. Coaches, it's a big business in college football. So what are we seeing now that we didn't see even 10 years ago, and it was a big business 10 years ago, is that it's much like the NFL. Hey, if the coach isn't performing, they can be out at midseason. And so we see with Frank Beamer moving on and making that announcement early, it was able for them to go through the process, go through the right channels at the right time, and make the move early and get out in front of South Carolina, possibly LSU, we thought, Georgia, et cetera, across the country. So, and now we've got coaching hires and candidates at Maryland and Rutgers, which, man, we could really debate how good those jobs are. But 79 Hokie, you definitely think that, Frank did the right thing and finished off his career in a class way in leading Virginia Tech to the big rivalry win again and again, making this decision known early so that the administration could be out in front of the coaching hire with all the chaos going on around the country and all the vacancies. So appreciate you chiming in. We do have an open seat, and I've got about 10 minutes before I've got to move on to another show, talking TV production. If you have any interest in television production, you can find out from Marty McPadden and myself how to get into TV production and do it right, and I won't go into my background and experience now. We'll talk college football. What do you think about the Virginia coaching job? Good job, bad job, okay job? I'm going to go somewhere between okay job and good job. The recruiting base in that area is really fertile. It's not the Deep South. It's not the West Coast, Southern California. But after that, and after Texas, of course, it rivals Ohio and Pennsylvania, which are great recruiting bases. So there's a lot of talent there in Virginia. I think the ACC has much more leverage than it did a few years ago with the likes of Louisville coming on board, Florida State winning a national championship. And so the ACC is not regarded as being the least of the Power Five leagues as much as it certainly was a few years ago. So I think there's some respect there from the ACC, and the ACC's competed a little bit better, much better with the SEC if you look at the results in recent years. So kids are more bound to stay in ACC country. So I think Mike London actually has some talent there. And you're very welcome. So we're here at 1 o'clock every Monday, 79 Hokie, every Monday at 1 o'clock here on Blab to talk college football. If you want to jump on board at any time. In Virginia Tech, obviously awaiting a bowl bid. And I've heard the Belk Bowl. I have not done any prognostications with the bowl structure right now. We'll wait until the weekend, and I don't go into predicting bowl games, but I've heard the Belk Bowl for Virginia Tech. So I have my top 25 here, and I know one of these selections is going to really stand out. So I do this every week as I release a top 25 prior to the College Football Playoff Committee releasing its top 25. And I want to make something clear because I get a lot of comments on my YouTube channel. You can join me there at MarkRogersTV. I knock out college football audio and video podcasts. So my top 25 takes into consideration resume. I'm not projecting who you're going to beat. I'm making no projections. So this is not my judgment on the best teams. So I could have a team at number 7 that I believe is better than the team at number 3, but I don't think their resume is as good. So I'm going strictly on a resume. Who did you beat? If you lost, who did you lose to? And in those losses, did you compete? Did you compete, or did you get blown out, or did you lose to bad teams? And then overall performance, top to bottom. So here's what I've got. And I know one of these selections is going to stand out, but I can defend it. All right. Georgia's off the radar. They just barely missed. I did my top 25, actually did 26. So I forgot somebody. So Georgia, you're just off the top 25 list. USC's at 25. Impressive performance this past weekend. Wisconsin 24, Temple 23. Tennessee's at 22, LSU 21, Oregon 20, Michigan 19, Utah 18, Ole Miss at 17. I've got Florida 16, Baylor's at 15, Houston 15, Baylor 14, TCU 13, Oklahoma State 12, Notre Dame 11, Stanford 10, Northwestern 9, Florida State 8, North Carolina 7, Ohio State 6, OU 5, Alabama 4, Michigan State at number 3, Iowa 2, Clemson 1. And again, that doesn't mean I believe, for example, Iowa's a better team than Alabama. Alabama's lost. Iowa's defeated more ranked teams. We could dissect the games, and I could give you a clearer picture of why. Iowa's 2 and Alabama's 4, but that's the main reason. Iowa's undefeated. Alabama's lost to a 3-loss team, and Iowa's schedule is better than the national media would lead you to believe if you dissect the games and look at it overall. I believe Alabama and Ohio State are the most talented and on any given day the best teams in the country. But Ohio State to date, unless there is complete chaos around the country, and it would have to fall, the dominoes would have to fall perfectly. Ohio State is out of the college football playoff. Alabama is going to win the SEC championship. I think there's about a 90-some% certainty. The line came out last night for the SEC championship game. Alabama came out as a 12.5-point favorite. And if I were a betting man, that line jumped to 17 like that, and it should. I don't see Florida scoring points in this game against Alabama. And this is coming from a guy that would love to see chaos. I would love to see the system discredited and there to be chaos, but I just don't see it happening. Clemson, North Carolina, a much more intriguing game. So for one of the few times the SEC championship game, and in recent years, this has been the case by and large, 2013, 2014, especially with Mizzou in there. Credit Gary Pinkel for getting the job done. There's another head coaching job up for grabs there at Mizzou. But Mizzou going to the SEC championship game the last 2 years and being manhandled, especially by Bama. And now we've got this matchup. So the SEC East, the powers, Tennessee's trying. Butch Jones is recruiting to that level. Now we'll see if he can pull it through next season. I believe you're going to see a jump from Tennessee. They lost 4 excruciating games this year. But the SEC East, Georgia, their coaching hire is going to be huge in solidifying that program. I have much to say about the Georgia job. Catch me at Mark Rogers TV on my YouTube channel, because there you can see me talk Georgia football with David Waters from Gator Sports Radio and we break down the Georgia situation. This is just a plus job there at the University of Georgia for many reasons: resources, facilities, recruiting base. There was a study done not too long ago that more high-level FBS football players and NFL players play high school football in the Atlanta metro area than anywhere in the country within a certain mile radius of Atlanta. Stay home, Georgia. Recruit right there. I know they're in Athens and Georgia Tech's in Atlanta, but we know the difference in the two football programs, that Georgia owns that state. And if they lock down the state, they can compete for national championships. Mark Richt has done that to a certain extent. His recruiting classes are top-notch, but talent development has just not been there. All right, this is college football coast to coast. They come your way every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, and you can join me at MarkRogersTV on YouTube. Join me on Twitter as well, MarkRogersTV. We will discuss and debate college football at the very best time of year. Until next week, again, 1 o'clock Eastern, we will see you and enjoy the championship games this week.